I knew something was off the moment she walked into the living room that evening. Not because she looked different, though she did. Her hair was pulled back tighter than usual, lips glossed just a little too perfectly for a casual Thursday night. She wore that black blouse I'd always loved, the one with the low neckline that skimmed her collarbones like it was designed to be undressed. But it was her eyes. Wide, almost too bright, like someone rehearsing a script and terrified they might forget a line. I was halfway through folding laundry, a beer sweating next to me on the coffee table, when she said, "Can we talk?" Not, "Hey," or "What's for dinner?" or "I had the worst client today." Just those 3 words, "Can we talk?" Like a surgeon asking if now's a good time to remove a limb. I nodded, still pretending to sort socks, even though my hands had stopped moving. She sat down on the opposite end of the couch. Not next to me, like she used to. Not touching me. That space between us said more than her voice did when she finally said it. "I think we should open the marriage." Just like that. No lead-in. No apology. No trembling or tears. Just words. Cool, confident, delivered like she was announcing we were switching internet providers. I stared at her. Not because I didn't understand, but because I did. Too well. "Open," I repeated slowly, like the word had to be sounded out. "The marriage." She nodded, watching me carefully, like I was some fragile animal she was trying not to scare off. "I've been reading," she continued, "about ethical non-monogamy. There's a whole world out there, and I think we've stopped growing. As people, as lovers. Lovers. She hadn't called us that in years. Now it felt like a weapon. "I want honesty," she said. "Transparency. Growth. I think we've earned the right to evolve." I didn't respond. Couldn't. My brain was still back at open. At lovers. At the fact that she was sitting across from me like this was a TED Talk on modern relationships and not a grenade lobbed into our shared life. She continued, undeterred. "It's not about sex." "The hell it isn't," I muttered. She blinked. Just once. Then regrouped, like a lawyer catching herself mid-misstep. "It's about freedom. About not tying each other down. We can create rules. Boundaries. I've been thinking about this a long time, and that's when it hit me. You've already made up your mind." She didn't deny it. And in that silence, the whole house changed. The couch I was sitting on felt colder. The walls felt closer. The pictures on the wall, wedding photos, vacations, us kissing on a beach, suddenly looked like stock images from a life that no longer existed. I wasn't stupid. I've read enough threads. Watched enough friends crash and burn in modern arrangements. I knew what this usually meant. I found someone already. "I just want to ease the guilt by making you complicit." So I said nothing. Just nodded slowly, like I was absorbing the blow. "Okay," I said. "Okay." Her expression faltered for a half-second. Not because I agreed, but because it hadn't occurred to her that I might. And then came the knock. 3 short, soft taps at the door. Like fate had better timing than either of us. "That must be Claire," she said, standing up. Claire. Her aunt. Her mom's younger sister. The one who lived out east and only visited when things were falling apart. Funerals, family fights, interventions. I hadn't seen Claire in 5 years, and suddenly she was here. The front door opened, and in stepped a woman in her late 40s who looked like she could have stepped off a courtroom drama. Tailored slacks, boots too practical to be sexy, but somehow still were. A long dark coat, and eyes that took in everything like she was already memorizing details for a deposition. "Aunt Claire," I said, standing. "David," she replied, her voice calm and low. "Thanks for letting me stay." She moved with that slow, careful grace of someone who knew they didn't have to fill silence. That silence itself could be a scalpel. "We just started talking about the arrangement," my wife offered, giving Claire a look I couldn't read. Claire said nothing. She just set her bag down and removed her coat. Underneath it, a soft cream sweater clung to her in ways that felt deliberate, not inappropriate, just knowing. She gave me a small, unreadable smile. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "You're not," I said, my voice tighter than I meant. My wife looked between us, clearly eager to return to her prepared bullet points. "Anyway, we don't have to decide everything tonight. I just wanted to start the conversation." Start. As if anything about this was just beginning. She kissed me on the cheek, quick, practiced, obligatory. Then she went upstairs, leaving Claire and me alone in the living room. Claire didn't sit. She walked slowly toward the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines. She wasn't making small talk. She was studying me, not judging, just taking stock. You look tired, she said softly. I didn't answer. She turned, finally meeting my eyes. You don't have to agree to anything just to keep her, she said. I blinked. I didn't say I was. No, Claire said. But you didn't say you weren't. She walked past me then, slowly, like she was filing everything away. And just before she disappeared down the hallway, she said it. Not unkindly, just factual, like a diagnosis. You didn't open this marriage, David, she said. You're being prepared for exit. I wasn't expecting to wake up that early, especially after barely sleeping. But my body didn't ask for permission. It just snapped awake at 5:47 a.m., like it had urgent business. The house was quiet. My wife was still upstairs, likely curled into the sheets with a serene smile, like she'd solved some great ethical puzzle. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs, the faint creak of wood as the house settled. And then, soft footsteps in the kitchen. Claire. I sat up and pulled on a t-shirt. I don't know what compelled me to follow the sound. Curiosity, maybe, or something closer to survival. Whatever it was, my feet hit the floor like they had somewhere important to go. She didn't flinch when I entered the kitchen. She was already there at the island, barefoot, hair tied up in a loose bun, wearing a faded Yale sweatshirt and sipping black coffee from a chipped mug like she'd lived here her whole life. Morning, she said without turning. Didn't know anyone else was up, I replied. I usually am, she said, then gestured to the coffee pot. It's strong. I don't do half-effort caffeine. I poured myself a mug, the silence between us thick, but not uncomfortable. There was something almost tactical about her presence, like she was giving me time to speak first just to see how I'd use it. You heard everything last night, I finally said. I did. I nodded, letting the warmth from the cup bleed into my palms. And Claire turned fully now, resting her elbows on the island counter. Her expression was calm, not kind, not cruel, just clinical. I want to ask you one question, she said. Okay. Whose idea was this really? Yours or hers? I stared into the dark surface of my coffee. She said it was mutual. Claire snorted quietly. Of course she did. She took another sip and let the words hang. Let me tell you what I've seen, David. I've worked with couples, divorces, infidelity cases, prenups, mediation. I've seen modern love gutted and dressed up 100 ways to make it palatable. You know how it usually starts? I didn't answer. Exactly like this, she continued. With the word growth. With phrases like radical honesty and ethical non-monogamy. And always, with one person who's already a step ahead. I swallowed hard. So, you think she's cheating? No, Claire said. I think she's pre-clearing the runway, making sure there's no turbulence when she takes off. I bristled. That's a little cynical. No, it's realistic. You think she's asking for permission, but what she's really doing is rebranding betrayal into virtue. That one stung. She says she wants transparency, I argued. She wants your transparency, Claire countered. She already has her secrets, David. She just doesn't want to feel bad about them. So she redefines the game, tells you it's progressive, and if you resist, you're the one stuck in the past. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked beneath me, loud in the stillness of the morning. You don't think open marriages can work? Claire tilted her head. Statistically? Sure. Maybe. But only when both people want it. Really want it. And even then, it's a tightrope act on a windy day. She leaned closer now, her voice low. But that's not what's happening here, is it? You didn't come up with this. You didn't bring it to the table. She did. And you said yes because you thought you had no choice. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because she was right. I hadn't agreed. I'd complied. Claire's eyes softened, just a fraction. I know you love her, she said. I looked down at my hands. 17 years. She's already changed the terms, Claire said. Now you have to decide if you're going to renegotiate, or just keep signing whatever she puts in front of you. I exhaled. So what am I supposed to do? Say no and become the jealous, controlling husband? Or say yes, she said, and watch her rewrite the ending without your input. Her words didn't come with fire. They came with a kind of terrible calm, like the voice of a surgeon explaining where the blade had to go. She stood, slowly, and rinsed her mug in the sink. You're not the one opening this marriage, she said, drying her hands. You're being exited. Slowly, quietly. with words like growth and love and honesty. I stared at her, unsure what to say. And then she did something strange. She smiled, not wide, not bright, just a subtle twist at the corner of her mouth. I've handled hundreds of these cases, she said. There's a pattern, but there's also a way to break it. I raised an eyebrow. How? She looked over her shoulder as she left the kitchen. By refusing to be the one left holding the wreckage, she said. By deciding if you want to survive this, or win it. Then she was gone. I sat in silence for a long time, the coffee cooling in my hands, wondering when exactly this marriage stopped being a partnership and became a slow negotiation for my own erasure. And why Claire was the first one who finally said it out loud. By the end of the first week, the rules started multiplying. Not growing, mutating. At first, she framed them like guardrails. Reassuring. Reasonable. Almost sweet. We should be transparent, she said one night over dinner, twirling pasta she barely ate. If either of us goes on a date, we talk about it. No secrets. I nodded. Transparency sounded fair. Healthy, even. Then the addendums crept in. But not too many details, she added quickly. I don't want to feel burdened by imagery. Imagery. Interesting word choice, considering she was the one opening doors. Also, she continued, maybe we don't bring people into the house. That should stay ours. I agreed again. Our house had enough ghosts already. And obviously, she said, like it was an afterthought, no coworkers. That gets messy. I almost laughed, because I'd already noticed the way her phone lit up at odd hours. The way she angled the screen away from me, thumb moving fast, confident. The way she smiled at nothing while brushing her teeth, hips swaying like she was listening to music only she could hear. Rules, it turned out, were mostly for me. She started going out more. Gym classes that ran late. Dinners with friends whose names she'd never mentioned before. Drinks that turned into crashing on the couch somewhere because it was safer than driving. Every explanation came pre-packaged with reassurance. You're okay, right? She'd ask, already halfway into her coat. You said you were open to this. And I was. Outwardly. Inside, something kept scraping. The first real crack came Friday night. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress. Red. Tight. The kind she hadn't worn for me in years. I watched from the bed, pretending to scroll through my phone. You look nice, I said. She smiled, distracted. Thanks. Where you headed? She hesitated. Just a fraction. Dinner. With a friend. I waited. She didn't elaborate. Which friend? I asked. She sighed, like I'd just asked her to explain gravity. Does it matter? I thought of the rules. Transparency. Honesty. I thought we were telling each other, I said carefully. She turned, eyes sharp now. I am telling you. I'm just not giving you a play-by-play. That's not healthy. There it was. The first inversion. Her privacy was sacred. Mine was negotiable. Later that night, alone in our bed, I stared at the ceiling while her side stayed empty. I tried not to imagine her laughing across a table, leaning forward, letting someone new memorize the shape of her mouth. I tried not to picture hands, confident, unfamiliar, finding places I used to know by instinct. I failed. The next morning, she came home humming. Humming. She slipped out of her heels, toes flexing against the hardwood, and gave me a soft kiss on the cheek like she was tucking in a child. Good night, she whispered. I didn't ask how it went. But Claire noticed. She always did. We were in the kitchen together later, my wife upstairs on a call, door closed. Claire stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the street like she was waiting for something to unfold. She didn't come home last night, Claire said calmly. No. And she didn't explain. No. Claire nodded. Not surprised. Just confirming data. She asks for transparency, Claire continued, but only in one direction. I leaned against the counter. I think she's trying not to hurt me. Claire turned then, studying my face. No, she said. She's trying not to be inconvenienced by your feelings. That landed heavier than I expected. By Sunday, the rules shifted again. She brought it up casually, like a weather update. I've been thinking, she said. Maybe it's better if we don't tell each other about dates at all. At least not right away. It creates unnecessary tension. I looked at her. Really looked. So transparency's off the table now. She frowned. That's not what I said. It kind of is. She crossed her arms. You're overanalyzing this. There it was again. The subtle accusation. The suggestion that my discomfort was a personal flaw, not a reaction. That night, Claire poured herself a glass of wine and handed me one without asking. Our fingers brushed, just briefly, but it lingered in a way that surprised me. "Do you know what the biggest red flag is?" she asked. I took a sip. "The other guy?" "No," she said. "The fact that she's rewriting the rules faster than you can adapt. That means she already knows where this is going." I stared into the wine. "You think she has someone specific?" Claire didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I think," she said, "that people don't blow up stable lives unless there's already a soft place to land." The air between us felt charged then. Not sexual exactly, but intimate. Dangerous in a quieter way. She wasn't touching me, but she was close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something subtle. Intentional. "She watches you, you know," Claire added. "To see how much you'll take." I swallowed. "And if I keep taking it?" Claire met my eyes. Held them. "Then she'll keep taking more." Upstairs, I heard my wife laugh. Bright. Carefree. A sound I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. Claire stepped back, setting her glass down. She didn't smile this time. "Do you want to survive this?" she asked quietly. "Or do you want to win it?" The question hung there, heavy and unavoidable. And for the first time since the announcement, I realized doing nothing wasn't neutral. It was surrender. Claire didn't bring it up right away. She never did. That was the thing about her. She had this ability to read the timing of a room like it was a live wire. She didn't force hard truths. She waited until you were the one begging for them. And I was begging, silently, that Thursday night, sitting alone at the kitchen table with a beer I didn't really want and half a dozen unread texts from my wife lighting up my phone. They were short, casual, like nothing was crumbling. "Staying late, again. Don't wait up. Dinner with Margot. Need girl time. You okay?" I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. I didn't know the script, the rules, the tone. Claire walked in quietly. No makeup, no armor. She poured herself a whiskey, neat, and leaned against the counter like she'd just come off the battlefield. She didn't ask for permission to speak. She didn't need to. "You know what bothers me the most?" she said, swirling the glass slowly. "The word understanding. The way they use it like a leash." I raised my eyes. She continued. "Every time I worked a case where the man agreed to an open marriage to support his wife's growth. Do you know how that ended?" I shook my head. They lost everything. Piece by piece. Not in a courtroom. Not with yelling. Quietly. Like sand slipping through their hands. I didn't speak. Not yet. I just listened. She walked over and placed a folder in front of me. Thick. Marked up. Tattered. "You ever heard of emotional precedent?" she asked. I opened the folder. Divorce documents. Testimonies. Printouts of texts. Photos. Most of it was blacked out, names redacted. Claire tapped the corner of the file. This man was a school principal. Wife wanted to explore polyamory. He agreed. Thought he was being progressive. Supportive. Mature. I skimmed the summary. Within 6 months, he was sleeping in the guest room, seeing his kids every other weekend, and living off savings while she moved her partner into the marital home. She said she wanted love without limitation. Claire said, her voice flat. Then she weaponized his consent when he resisted. Said he'd agreed. Said he'd been fine with it. I stared at the final page. He'd signed a no-contest agreement. Walked away with nothing but visitation. She framed his discomfort as insecurity, Claire added. Said he was emotionally unstable. Then brought up every minor argument from the past 10 years to paint him as controlling. I closed the folder slowly. She was a therapist, by the way, Claire added. Knew exactly what words to use. What behaviors to twist. I exhaled. What happened to him? Started over. Eventually. She took another sip. But it broke something in him. He said something I'll never forget. I agreed to keep her, but she only made the agreement to get rid of me slowly. The words hit too hard. Too close. Claire stepped behind me. Not touching. Just there. Like a shadow that had learned to care. I brought this up because I see the pattern, she said. The same language. The same deflection. She's not inviting you into something. She's conditioning you to accept your own replacement. I looked up at her. She hasn't asked me to see anyone, I said quietly. Claire raised an eyebrow. Has she told you not to? I paused. Not exactly. But she doesn't seem to want to know. Claire gave a small, knowing smile. Of course not. That would make it real. She wants all the freedom without the threat of you discovering what that freedom actually feels like. She sat down across from me now. Her eyes held something sharp. I've had clients like you. Smart men. Good men. They thought they were being fair. Open-minded. Until they realized they'd made 100 tiny concessions and didn't know how to take a single one back. I took another drink. So what's the move? Get a lawyer? Call her bluff? Claire leaned in. Not yet. First, you stop reacting. Stop confessing. Stop explaining. You gather information. I frowned. Spy. Protecting, she corrected. Legally, emotionally, financially. If this goes where I think it's going, you'll need leverage. And clarity. I stared down at the folder again. So I become what? A project? Claire shook her head. You become a case worth winning. Silence filled the room for a moment. And then she added, do you know why they get away with it? I looked up. Because no one treats men like you as victims. Not until it's too late. You say you're hurt, and they say you're insecure. You say it's not fair, and they say you're possessive. You leave, and they call you a coward. You stay, and they call you weak. Her voice lowered. But if you prepare, if you plan, if you stop waiting for permission to take yourself seriously. She leaned forward now, inches away. You win. That word did something to me. It snapped something into focus that had been blurring for weeks. I wasn't grieving a betrayal anymore. I was starting to prepare for a confrontation. Not loud, not messy, but strategic. That night, long after Claire had gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen with the folder still open, reading through the stories of other men who had smiled through their own undoing. And I promised myself, right then, that I wouldn't be next. The first time she didn't come home until morning, she didn't even lie. No text, no call, just silence until 7:14 a.m. when the front door creaked open and her heels clicked faintly against the hardwood like punctuation marks in a story she didn't feel obligated to tell. I was in the kitchen, half-dressed, packing Ellie's lunch for school. Claire sat at the breakfast bar, sipping her usual black coffee. Calm, quiet, watching. My wife appeared in the hallway like she had just returned from the gym, not someone else's bed. Hair tied back, sweatshirt too clean, skin flushed, but not from the cold. She smiled, bright, effortless. Morning. Claire's eyes met mine, and I saw the moment we both understood the same thing. There would be no pretending now. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice level. Long night. Yeah, lost track of time. I nodded slowly, closing Ellie's lunchbox. Everything okay? Her smile twitched, just slightly. You don't need to worry. It's not like that. Not like what? But I didn't press. Because I knew that game now. Any request for clarity would be rebranded as possessiveness. Any discomfort framed as regression. I let it hang in the air instead. She kissed me on the cheek like nothing had shifted, then floated up the stairs for a shower. Claire waited until the water started running before she spoke. She stopped hiding it, she said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Something had changed that morning, not just in her behavior, but in me. The numbness I'd been carrying, the dull ache of disbelief, had hardened into something sharper. Not anger. Not yet. Clarity. She wasn't exploring. She was transitioning. And I had become transitional by default. Claire must have seen it on my face. That subtle change in posture. That way I didn't flinch anymore. She's not playing pretend now, she said, voice low. That was her first move out in the open. I nodded. And what's mine? Claire studied me for a moment, then pushed a whiskey tumbler across the counter. Not filled with whiskey, just ice water, but the ritual was there. Intentional. Grounding. You hold, she said. You wait. You watch. She's not watching me. She will. That evening, my wife came downstairs in a short beige dress, tight at the waist, low at the back. New. I'd never seen it before. She smelled like vanilla and anticipation. Do you need anything before I go? She asked. She said it like she was doing me a kindness, like she was checking a box that made her absence easier to swallow. No, I said, leaning against the sink. You going out with the same guy? The pause was micro, a blink too long. Enough to tell me yes, but she wasn't going to confirm it. Does it matter? That was the second time she'd said that to me this month. I shrugged. Not really. She left 20 minutes later. Claire walked into the kitchen not long after, still barefoot, hair in a loose braid over one shoulder. She didn't ask questions this time, just opened a bottle of bourbon and poured a glass for each of us. We sat outside on the back porch, the night air cool enough to bite gently at the skin. I didn't speak. Neither did she. Not at first. I've never told you what I used to do, she said after a while. You mean before you became the woman who scares me slightly? She smiled. Just a little. Family law, mediation, then private consulting, affairs, open relationships, asset protection. My specialty was leverage. I looked over at her, the bourbon warm in my hand. I never asked because I didn't want to know, I said. Now I do. Claire turned toward me then, her face illuminated by the faint porch light. You're not in an open marriage, she said quietly. You're in an exit strategy. I'd heard her say it before, but this time I believed her. She's not hiding it anymore, I said, and I'm not pretending it doesn't hurt. Claire didn't flinch. Good. That means you're still sane. We sat there for a while, watching the trees sway, listening to the distant hum of traffic and the quiet creaks of a house trying to hold its secrets. And then something shifted. Claire turned toward me, not dramatically, just slightly. She didn't touch me, didn't lean in, but her voice changed. Sitting still doesn't mean being weak, she said. Sometimes it means you're waiting for your opponent to overplay their hand. I looked at her then, really looked. The way her eyes didn't flinch from mine. The way her posture didn't shrink or inflate, just existed, calm, firm, grounded. You ever get tired of being the one who sees everything? I asked. Claire took a slow sip. Every day. Why help me? She looked at me for a long moment, then set her glass down. Because you remind me of a man I once watched lose everything. And you're just smart enough not to be him, if you wake up in time. I nodded slowly. Then, just as I was about to thank her, she added. Also because she's family, and I don't like seeing my blood act like a cliché. I laughed, despite myself. It felt foreign in my throat. Claire stood slowly, her hand brushing the edge of my shoulder. Not a touch. A signal. Stability isn't boring, she said over her shoulder as she walked back inside. It's rare. And somehow, in that moment, the rarest thing in my life wasn't the woman I married. It was the one sitting quietly beside me in the dark, teaching me how not to be destroyed. It was a Thursday when she finally asked if I'd slept with anyone. She was brushing her hair at the vanity, wearing a satin robe that used to mean something. Her tone was light, teasing even, but there was an edge to it. A faint glint behind her smile that told me she wasn't just curious. She was testing. So, she said, catching my eye in the mirror, are you seeing anyone yet? I didn't answer right away. I stood in the doorway, still in work clothes, hands in my pockets like I'd stumbled into the wrong house. She kept brushing, watching my reaction in the glass. You haven't mentioned anything, she added, like that was part of the arrangement now. Like my silence was the problem. Would it bother you if I had? I asked. She paused. One stroke of the brush hung in the air. Then, too casually, no, of course not. That's the point, right? Right. The point. Except she never asked permission. She asked forgiveness in advance and called it growth. I'd been playing defense since week 1, and now she was circling back to check if I'd caught up, or if I was still standing there, waiting for her to come home. I gave a non-answer. Something like, not really my focus right now. She didn't press. That was its own answer. I left the room a few minutes later, and that should have been the end of it. Another small crack in the wall between us. But something about the way she asked stuck with me. The half-mocking tone. Like she assumed I was still waiting. Still loyal. Still passive. Like she'd moved on and expected me to watch like it was an art exhibit. Claire found me in the garage later, staring at the shelves like they held some kind of solution. I must have looked pathetic. Beer in one hand, some old wrench in the other, pretending I was fixing something that wasn't broken. You all right? She asked. Sure, I lied. She leaned against the frame of the door, arms crossed. She asked, didn't she? Yeah. And you told her? No. Because it's none of her business? Claire guessed. No, I said. Because there's nothing to tell. She nodded once, slowly. She thinks you're still in wait mode. Like some emotionally available but non-threatening placeholder. I didn't respond. Because that was exactly what I felt like. Claire stepped into the garage. No makeup. No performance. She didn't look like a mentor in that moment. Or a strategist. She just looked tired. Human. I have an offer, she said. I looked at her. Not sex, she clarified. Not revenge. Then what? A plan. I raised an eyebrow. A roadmap, she said. Out of this. With your dignity intact. Maybe even your assets. I laughed under my breath. You really know how to flirt. She didn't smile. I'm serious, she said. Most men in your position try to salvage the narrative. They cling to hope until it breaks their fingers. You don't need that. You need leverage. Leverage. Claire stepped closer. Emotional. Legal. Practical. You think this ends in compromise? It ends in court, or in slow erosion. But if you take control now, you have options. I looked away. It's still my marriage. Claire's voice softened. Is it? Silence. She walked to the workbench, ran a finger across the dusty top. Do you know how many husbands I've worked with who thought staying quiet meant staying strong? How many? All of them. I snorted. And how many won? She looked back at me. Only the ones who stopped trying to play fair. There was no malice in her tone. No vengefulness. Just fact. I'm not saying torch the house, she said. I'm saying know where the exits are before she seals them behind you. I took a long drink of the beer. And what would that look like? Claire ticked items off on her fingers. Start documenting. Dates. Times. Contradictions. Anything that contradicts her version of events. Financials. Check for new accounts. Unexplained purchases. You think she's hiding money? I think she's making sure she can leave without depending on you. I exhaled. She already did emotionally, Claire added. Now she's preparing logistically. That word again. Preparing. She thinks I won't do anything, I muttered. Claire stepped closer. She smelled like soap and cold air. You won't. Not unless you stop waiting for her to give you permission. Something changed in the air between us then. Subtle but heavy. Like a door had cracked open, letting in a draft we both felt, but didn't name. Claire met my eyes. I'm not here to sleep with you, David. I'm here because I've watched too many good men become their own aftermath. I nodded. And what do you get out of this? She didn't blink. Closure. That answer lingered longer than it should have. I didn't ask what her story was. But for the first time, I wondered. Claire stepped back. Think about it. I'll show you what I've been working on if you're ready. Working on. Call it contingency planning. She turned to leave, but stopped in the doorway. You don't need to chase freedom, she said. You need leverage. And then she was gone, leaving me alone in a garage full of dead tools, with the first real decision I'd had in months waiting for an answer. I stopped reacting on a Wednesday. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some climactic breaking point or dramatic act of defiance. It was something quieter than that. Something internal. I woke up and didn't check her side of the bed. Didn't scan for clues, perfume, new lingerie tags in the trash, unfamiliar receipts. I didn't ask where she'd been the night before. I didn't scroll her social media to piece together what wasn't being said. I just made coffee, packed my lunch, and left for work without a single word. Something had clicked. It wasn't detachment. Not exactly. It was control. She noticed it first. By Friday, she started watching me the way I used to watch her, covertly, with a flicker of suspicion behind her eyes. At dinner, she kept glancing at my phone when it buzzed, asking casually, new client, or who's blowing up your inbox? I'd shrug. Nothing important. No more explanations. No more performances. I was no longer playing the game. I was learning the board. Claire saw it immediately. That's the posture of someone who's done losing, she said one night as we passed in the hallway. I didn't respond. I just held her gaze for a second longer than usual. And she smiled. Really smiled, for the first time since she arrived. It started with a notebook. Plain black. No markings. No drama. Inside, I began recording dates. Times. Conversations. Inconsistencies. She said she was with Margot Tuesday night. But Margot's tagged photo showed her across town at a wine tasting with 3 other women, none of whom were my wife. She claimed she had a work event Friday, but the company calendar showed no such meeting. She left for the gym Sunday morning in full makeup and came home smelling like bourbon. Everything went in the notebook. Not because I planned to weaponize it immediately, but because I needed a map. And men like me? We've walked into too many ambushes blind. Claire started feeding me tips, quietly, methodically. Check her credit card for cash withdrawals that don't match purchases. Watch for new streaming accounts. People often use burner emails to hide subscription history. Document any changes to joint accounts, even small ones. It felt ridiculous at first, like I was preparing for war with someone I'd once promised forever to. But that's the lie they never talk about in vows, that love, if unguarded, can become a liability. Week 5 was the first time she didn't like the silence. She came home late, hair tousled, cheeks flushed, blouse buttoned one too low. I didn't comment, didn't ask, didn't flinch. I stayed on the couch, reading. She walked past me, waiting for the question I used to always ask. How was your night? It never came. She lingered in the hallway, backlit by the soft glow of the foyer light. "Hey," she said finally. "Are you okay?" I looked up. "Of course." She tilted her head. "You've been quiet lately." I marked my place in the book, set it down. Just focusing on things that matter. She blinked, caught off guard by the calmness. The lack of accusation. That was the thing about people who cheat. They expect anger. They expect drama. It's part of the script. They don't know what to do when you go off book. "Have you been seeing anyone?" she asked. The second time she'd asked in 2 weeks. I smiled polite. "Why do you want to know?" She faltered. I don't know. You're different lately." I nodded slowly. "So are you." That was it. No bitterness. No theater. Just truth, served cold and clean. She left the room a minute later. Claire entered moments after. "You're in her head now," she said, eyes gleaming with something like approval. I leaned back. "Feels weird." "Good weird or dangerous weird?" "Both." She nodded. "Good. That means you're doing it right." Claire's plan wasn't about revenge. It was about leverage. She helped me set up consultations with 2 attorneys, quietly, off the books. She helped me organize our financial records, back up cloud data, scan in photos, digitize everything sentimental or irreplaceable. "Divorce isn't just a breakup," she said. "It's a logistics problem. Solve the logistics, and the emotions don't sink the ship." I'd never seen anyone so precise. And yet, she wasn't cold. One night, as we stood in the kitchen washing dishes side by side, she reached over and squeezed my forearm, just once. "You're not broken," she said. I didn't realize I needed to hear it until she said it. On Sunday, I made dinner. Real dinner. Pasta from scratch, roasted vegetables, a bottle of red she used to love. She came home at 6:30, eyebrows raised. "What's this?" "Dinner," I said, setting down a plate. She sat, hesitantly. "What's the occasion?" "Nothing. Just wanted to cook." Halfway through the meal, she said, "You've been distant." I smiled. "Have I?" "I'm serious." "So am I." She set her fork down. "You're not mad about anything?" "No." "You're not curious where I've been?" "Should I be?" Silence. Then, "I thought we were supposed to be open." I met her gaze. "We were. But open doesn't mean confessional. We're equal." She opened her mouth, closed it. I sipped my wine. And in that moment, for the first time since she'd said we should open the marriage, I saw it. Doubt in her eyes. Not guilt. Not shame. But something more dangerous. The creeping realization that I might no longer be the one waiting. It was the rain that night. How it came down hard, sudden and uninvited. That made everything feel more fragile than it already was. The house was quiet. My wife had left earlier, barely saying goodbye. Just a glance at her reflection, a spritz of perfume, and the telltale click of her heels down the hallway. She didn't tell me where she was going, and I didn't ask. I sat on the porch with a drink, watching water bead on the railing, trying to feel something about the woman I used to love. But instead, all I felt was the air shifting around me. Claire appeared without a word, as she often did. She was wearing a charcoal sweater, barefoot, a loose bun falling in soft spirals at her neck. She didn't ask to join me. She just lowered herself into the chair beside mine and pulled her legs up beneath her like it was her house, too. Maybe it was, in all the ways that mattered now. "You're breathing differently," she said after a while. I turned to her. "What does that mean?" "You used to exhale like the air hurt coming out. Like you were trying not to let too much emotion escape with it." I smiled just a little. "And now? Now you exhale like a man who stopped waiting for his punishment." I sipped my drink, then held it out toward her. She took it without hesitation, lips brushing the rim, tasting what I'd been tasting. A small, silent intimacy. The kind that sneaks up on you and plants roots before you notice. "She's noticed the shift," I said. Claire nodded. "Of course she has. You're not orbiting her anymore." She asked me again if I'm seeing anyone. "What did you say?" "That I'm focusing on things that matter." Claire smiled at that. Not mocking. Not proud. Just knowing. "She's trying to gauge whether you're still a fallback," she said. I looked at her. "Am I?" "That's not my question to answer," she said. "But if you still were, she wouldn't be asking." The wind blew harder. Rain slanted sideways. Claire pulled her sleeves over her wrists. "You cold?" I asked. "Not yet." But I stood anyway, went inside, and came back with a blanket. I draped it over her shoulders and sat back down. This time closer. Not touching, but the distance between us was now deliberate. Chosen. We sat like that for a long time. Then, she said something I hadn't expected. You ever wonder what this would have looked like if you met someone like me before her? I turned to her slowly. Why would you ask that? Because, she said, not looking at me, men like you don't usually get noticed until it's too late. Until you've already spent years giving everything to someone who didn't know how to value stillness. Her words stirred something low in my chest. What kind of man do you think I am? I asked. She finally met my eyes. The kind who doesn't fall apart. The kind who bends until he learns he's not supposed to be furniture. That silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dense. I looked at her mouth when she said it. She knew I did. She didn't look away. Claire didn't move. She didn't lean in. She let the moment sit, dangerously balanced on the edge of something unspoken but undeniable. You know, she said, voice softer now. This doesn't have to be a reaction. It doesn't have to be retaliation or revenge. Then what is it? It can be choice, healing, groundedness. You don't have to spiral into chaos just because she handed you the match. I looked at her, really looked. The quiet confidence, the steadiness, the absence of neediness, of manipulation, of veiled power plays. My wife had once made me feel desired, but Claire made me feel seen. She stood then, still wrapped in the blanket, and looked down at me. If you step into this, she said, there's no pretending later. You don't get to call it an accident. My pulse thudded, not from fear, from clarity. Claire walked past me toward the door, but stopped just inside the threshold. She didn't turn around when she said it. But if you do choose it, she said, you won't be stepping into chaos. You'll be stepping out of it. And then she disappeared into the house, her bare feet leaving no sound behind her. Just the memory of warmth and something new forming in the void my wife had left behind. I sat out there for a long time after that, rain soaking the edge of the porch, glass empty, head full. This wasn't about a moment anymore. This was about direction. The line we'd been dancing around, me and Claire, was no longer unspoken. It was just waiting to be crossed. She found out on a Monday. That morning had been unusually calm. She kissed me before work, not absent-mindedly, but like she remembered something from long ago, like she thought she could rewind. By then, I had stopped interpreting her gestures. I no longer assigned meaning to her touches or tried to read her silences. They were just moments. Noise in the background of a house where I was no longer waiting to be heard. Claire had been gone all weekend. She claimed she was visiting an old friend, but we both knew she'd given me space. After the porch conversation, after that look between us, we hadn't crossed the line physically. Not yet, but emotionally, it was already done. We had stopped circling. The line wasn't blurry anymore. It was only waiting for timing. And the timing came sooner than either of us expected. It was early afternoon when I got the text. She knows. Claire didn't elaborate. I left work early. When I pulled into the driveway, my wife's car was parked crooked, like she'd come home too fast, angry before she even got to the door. Inside, the house was humming with rage. She was in the living room, pacing, her phone in one hand, a crumpled piece of paper in the other. When she saw me, she froze. You've got to be kidding me, she said, venom behind every syllable. I closed the door quietly behind me. Afternoon. Don't, she snapped. Don't act like this is casual. I looked at the paper in her hand. A printout. Her voice cracked. Claire? Claire? I waited. You slept with my aunt, she hissed. I didn't, I said calmly. Not yet. That hesitation, that single breath between her speaking and me answering, was enough to shatter whatever narrative she was building. She blinked. What does that even mean? It means what it sounds like. Her mouth opened, closed. Rage was breaking down into disbelief. But underneath that, underneath the moral outrage, was something more dangerous. Panic. You think this is okay? She said. This is sick. It's manipulative. It's incestuous. I almost laughed. That's rich, coming from you. She stepped forward. I opened our marriage to grow, not to give you permission to fuck my family. I didn't raise my voice. You didn't open our marriage, Emily. You opened yours. I just stopped pretending I was still locked inside. She staggered back, as if my calm was more threatening than if I'd yelled. I trusted you, she hissed. I thought you were better than this. Claire entered the room like she'd been summoned by gravity. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't apologetic. She looked at my wife like a woman who had waited far too long to be treated like a villain. You trusted him? Claire asked. That's interesting, considering the burner accounts, the hotel charges, the late nights that started before you ever had the decency to announce the open marriage. Emily turned to her like she'd forgotten Claire was even a person, like she'd been a prop in her life until that very moment. "You're disgusting," she spat. "You've always been jealous of me." Claire didn't flinch. "No, I've always seen you. There's a difference." Emily stepped closer. "You don't get to insert yourself in our marriage." Claire smiled faintly. "You ended your marriage the moment you weaponized the word freedom to excuse infidelity. I'm just the person who stopped him from dissolving quietly." Emily's breath hitched. Then came the tears. Fake at first, then real. "You don't understand," she said to me, voice trembling. "This isn't fair. I didn't mean for it to get this far." That was the moment. The precise second when the mask cracked. Not because she was guilty, but because she realized she'd lost control of the narrative. Claire sat down on the arm of the couch, composed. "Let me help," she said, cool as ice. "Let's lay out your arguments and examine them." Emily looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "First," Claire continued, "you say you wanted an open marriage. But the way you went about it? Tactically selfish. You laid ground rules you never followed yourself. You demanded transparency, but offered none. You shifted the emotional burden to David and called it growth." Emily opened her mouth, but Claire raised a hand. "Second," she went on, "you started sleeping with someone else before there was even a real conversation. The announcement was damage control, not consent." I watched Emily's eyes darken. "You don't know." "I do know," Claire interrupted. "I read the messages." That was the dagger. Emily's face went pale, then flushed red. She turned to me, voice desperate now. "You went through my phone?" "No," I said. "You left it unlocked. You were in the shower. You had a message from Margot that ended with, 'See you at the Devon again Friday. Same time. Can't wait to make you scream again.'" Silence. Then Claire delivered the final blow. "You wanted openness," she said. "Just not equality." Emily turned away, breathing hard, hands shaking. The war was over, but she hadn't realized it yet. She left that evening without packing a bag. Didn't say where she was going. Didn't slam the door. She just vanished. Later, in the quiet aftermath, Claire and I stood in the kitchen. "You didn't need to defend me," I said. She poured herself a glass of water. "I wasn't defending you. I was holding up a mirror." "She'll spin this," I said. "She'll call it betrayal." Claire looked at me. "Let her." And just like that, the story she'd been writing ended. Not with a scream, not with violence, but with the one thing she never expected. Accountability. She didn't come home that night. Or the next. By Thursday, she'd texted once. "I need space to think." Nothing else. No apology. No denial. Not even a breadcrumb of accountability. Just 5 words that sounded more like a strategy than a confession. I didn't reply. Claire found me in the office that evening, sorting documents. Old tax returns. Joint account statements. Medical records. I'd pulled everything out into piles, organized by category, labeled with sticky notes. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "You're building a fortress." "No," I said. "I'm clearing the battlefield." Claire stepped in and picked up one of the manila folders. "You're ready then?" I nodded. "I made the call this morning. Lawyers booked for Monday." She said nothing at first, just set the folder down and nodded once. Not approval, not sadness, something more solemn, like a moment of silence before a necessary death. "She thinks you'll wait," she said finally. "She thinks space buys time, that she can rewrite the story if she waits long enough to become the victim." I looked up at her. "She doesn't know I've already left." Claire studied me. "Emotionally?" "No," I said. "Strategically. Because that's the thing people don't understand about separation. It doesn't begin with paperwork. It begins with clarity." And I'd already moved miles beyond her. When she returned, it was with forced softness. She came in quietly. No makeup. No dramatic gestures. Like she thought humility could undo architecture. She hovered near the entryway, as if unsure whether she was allowed back into her own life. I didn't rush to greet her. She didn't ask where I'd been. We spent the evening avoiding the shape of the thing between us. She asked about dinner like we were old roommates, complimented the smell of the rosemary chicken like it meant something. But I saw it in her eyes. She knew. She knew something had calcified in the silence. That I was no longer hers to soften. When I told her about the lawyer, she blinked 3 times. "You're filing?" "Yes." She swallowed. "Already." I nodded. "You opened the door." You don't get to choose who walks through. She sat down slowly, like her knees had forgotten how to hold her weight. I didn't think you'd want this, she said. I didn't, I answered. I wanted the truth. And when I couldn't get that, I wanted peace. And when you wouldn't offer that, I realized I needed control. She didn't cry. That surprised me. But she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. Like her confidence had finally hit the limits of its reach. Is this about Claire? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. No, I said. Claire's just the person who reminded me I matter. She looked up sharply. There it was again, the panic. The realization that her fallback wasn't falling back. You really don't see what you've done, I added. You introduced chaos and called it evolution. You stripped our foundation for parts and offered me gratitude for tolerating it. I was trying to be honest, she said. No, I corrected. You were trying to feel less guilty for a decision you'd already made. The silence after that was heavy. She stood. I never wanted to lose you, she said. But you were fine risking it. She didn't respond. Just walked upstairs slowly, as if each step cost her something. The divorce moved fast. Claire had already prepped me. We'd gathered evidence. Not to destroy her, but to protect myself. I requested the house. Not out of spite, but because I knew how she operated. She lived in the new, the shiny. She wouldn't want the memories. She'd fight for them anyway, but only because she thought I would fold. She underestimated me again. She tried to renegotiate the open marriage, said we should pause the filing and revisit the arrangement with healthier rules. I asked one question, why now? Her silence was my answer. It wasn't clarity. It was consequence. She thought filing was my bluff. She didn't realize I'd already moved on in every way that counted. Claire stayed mostly quiet during those weeks. She gave me space, respected my pace. But I felt her presence every day. Calm. Solid. Like an anchor that didn't chain me, but steadied me. On the day the paperwork was finalized, I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. And that was a victory of its own. A week later, she stopped by to grab the last of her things. We didn't argue. We didn't reminisce. She stood in the living room, holding a box of books she once called her soul shelf, and looked at me one last time. Tell Claire, she started, but trailed off. I raised an eyebrow. Tell her what? She shook her head. Nothing. Just be careful. I nodded once. Always. She left without another word. And that was the true ending. Not with flames. Not with sex or slamming doors. But with a woman realizing too late that she'd authored her own exit, and a man who no longer needed to explain why he wasn't chasing her into the fire. The chaos didn't end all at once. It leaked out slowly, like smoke clearing after a fire that never quite reached full blaze. Some days I'd wake up expecting a new message from her, a plea, a threat, some half-hearted attempt to reshape the narrative she'd already lost control of. But none came. Silence replaced the drama. And in that silence, I began to find myself again. Claire didn't move in. She didn't suggest anything like that. In fact, after the divorce was finalized, she took a week away. Said she needed air, perspective. At first, I thought it was distance. A soft withdrawal now that her role as my guide had ended. But when she returned, it wasn't with uncertainty. It was with intention. She showed up at my door, wearing jeans and a worn t-shirt, no makeup, a bottle of wine in one hand, and a USB drive in the other. What's that? I asked. She handed it over. Everything we collected. Financials. Evidence. Backup copies of everything. I stared at the small piece of plastic. You're giving it to me? Claire nodded. Because I'm not your case manager anymore. I'm not your safety net. I'm just a woman who wants to share a porch with you. I didn't say anything. I just pulled her in, held her there for a long time. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel like a man in recovery. I felt like a man ready. People ask how I could possibly move on so quickly. What they don't understand is that I didn't jump from one relationship into another. I evolved. My ex called it betrayal. In a few texts, she let the mask fall completely, said I'd been manipulated, said Claire had targeted me, said it was all a long game of seduction. But those texts weren't about me. They were about her inability to understand a version of me that didn't revolve around her anymore. She used to own the script. Now I was writing my own. Claire never called herself my girlfriend. Never asked what this was. She just stayed. She stayed through the quiet mornings and the long, uneventful weekends. She helped me rebuild, not dramatically, but in the small ways that matter. Fixing cabinet hinges. Replacing bulbs. restoring function to a house that had once been a theater for emotional performance. One night, months later, we sat out on the porch again. The same two chairs, the same bourbon between us. Claire leaned back, legs curled under her, and said, "You don't flinch anymore." "Should I?" She smirked. "You used to." I watched her for a while. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't flashy. But she was present, something my ex hadn't been in over a year, even when she sat 2 feet away from me. "You ever feel guilty?" I asked. Claire shrugged. I felt disappointed. That I didn't step in sooner. That I let her walk you into that kind of emotional erosion before I said something. "She was your family." "She still is," Claire said. "But family doesn't mean blind loyalty. It means being honest when they've stopped deserving silence." I thought about that for a long time. Then I asked the question I'd been avoiding for weeks. "Why me?" Claire turned to me slowly. "Because you didn't lie to yourself. You doubted, sure. You tried to hold the line longer than you should have. But when you saw the truth, you didn't run from it. You adapted. You learned. And then," she touched my hand gently, "you chose." I didn't need fireworks anymore. I didn't need grand passion or endless lust or the chaotic highs and lows of a love that burns out before it lands. What I needed was consistency. And that's what Claire gave me. Not promises, not illusions, but the quiet assurance that she wouldn't vanish just because the storm had passed. She stayed. And in staying, she rewrote what intimacy meant to me. No more walking on eggshells. No more code switching between husband, roommate, emotional sponge. No more battles disguised as conversations. Just stillness. Stillness and truth. One afternoon, my ex stopped by unannounced. I opened the door, and there she was, dressed sharp, sunglasses on, like she was going to war but hadn't figured out the battlefield yet. "I thought we could talk," she said. I let her in. Not out of guilt. Out of clarity. She stood in the kitchen, looked around like it was foreign. It probably felt that way now. The house wasn't cold anymore. It wasn't waiting for her mood to determine its temperature. She tried the casual tone first. "You look stable." I nodded. "I am." She looked away. "Claire's still here." "She's not here, but yes. We're together." There was a long pause. Then she said, "You know, what you did, sleeping with my aunt. It's going to haunt you." I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I just said, "She opened the marriage looking for freedom. Her aunt taught me what real security feels like." Her face tightened. A crack in the performance. She left 5 minutes later. Didn't look back. Didn't say goodbye. I watched her car drive away. Then I went back inside, poured a coffee, and sat on the porch. The same chair. The same stillness. Claire would be home later. She'd bring groceries. Maybe wine. Maybe nothing at all. And we'd sit here, shoulder to shoulder, not needing to say much. I wasn't waiting for a shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for love to become leverage. For the first time in a long time, I was just living. Not in someone else's fantasy. Not in someone else's shadow. But in something real. Intentional. Stable.